Our guest tonight is Kurt Volker, a former US envoy to NATO and Ukraine. Good evening, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Ambassador, it's been now a month since Donald Trump was elected by the American people, partly on the promise to end the war in Ukraine. We have now seen and heard his appointees who are supposed to get this done. So with your experience and insight, what kind of a deal for Ukraine is emerging from this?
Well, I think what we should expect to see is very much what Trump said all along, even when he met with Zelensky back in September, or after his phone call with Zelensky after the election. He's going to call Putin, and he's going to urge Putin to stop the war. Now, I don't expect Putin will agree immediately. He'll have demands, but I think Trump will try to keep it simple and say, no, you stop the fighting. I think what Trump expects to see is a ceasefire pretty much in place, continued support for Ukraine so that they develop a strong position, and to try to address any other issues through diplomatic means rather than through the war.
Right,
what I think is unknown. Yes, what I think is unknown is what Trump's position is going to be on Ukrainian NATO membership. I think that the key is not only stopping the fighting, which I think is doable, and I think Putin may be ready to stop fighting, but the key is going to be making this a permanent peace. How do you prevent Putin from attacking again? And there I see the only thing that would work is NATO membership. Other security assurances have never been convincing to Putin. But we don't yet know from Trump or his team if that is something they are considering, or if they are instead looking at a delay, putting down the road of NATO membership.
But, you know, where is this assumption that Putin is going to listen to Trump coming from? I mean, he hasn't been listening to anybody, and he's pushing his
that's
case.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And I think what I expect is Putin not to listen to Trump. I think that he will say, I need this, I need that, I have all these demands. And Trump is going to say, no, just stop the war. And so I think it will be a disagreement for a while.
Right.
We do have some developments that are actually very interesting, though. I believe that Putin is in a far weaker position now than he was when he started this war 3 years ago. I think that his economy is in difficult shape. Inflation is very high, over 25%. Interest rates are 21% and rising. The ruble is falling. Things are getting more expensive in Russia. So I think he's got some difficulties there. He also has difficulties militarily. They are stretched. They can't protect Kursk and go on the offensive in Russia at the same time.
Right.
They don't want to do conscription, so they're bringing in North Koreans and Houthis. They don't have enough artillery shells, so they get them from North Korea. They get drones from Iran. They were not able to keep forces in Syria, so they lost Aleppo. So I think he's in a difficult shape militarily as well.
Right,
so
but
I think
Mr.
Putin
Ambassador,
might be ready to take a pause.
But Mr. Ambassador, we sort of heard that for the past 3 years, that Russia is exhausted, that it's coming to the end of its resources, and yet they're advancing on the ground, slowly, but they're advancing. And the Europeans are divided, because some Europeans, you know, we're hearing from them, like from Mark Rutte, the new NATO Secretary General, that, you know, we will continue supporting Ukraine. He met with Mr. Trump in Mar-a-Lago. So he's arguing that America and Europe will continue supporting Kiev, and he's saying Russia, he's more or less saying the same things as you're saying, that you know, Russia can't win this war. But then we have Viktor Orban, you know, who claims to have Mr. Trump's ear, and he says he hears a different story from Mr. Trump. He just came out saying, you know, Mr. Trump told him that he will cut off funding for Ukraine, and he will put more pressure on Ukraine to end the conflict than on Russia.
Yeah, I don't think that Orban is a reliable interlocutor here. I think he says what he wants to say, in particular to try to please Putin. the reality is you don't need to put any pressure on the Ukrainians to negotiate at all. They are ready. They're very happy to end this conflict. It has to be reasonable, has to be in a way that respects the idea of Ukraine's sovereignty and independence. But Ukrainians are ready to talk. And in fact, we have President Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, in Washington today. And he's meeting with Keith Kellogg, the designated Ukraine envoy, as well as Mike Waltz, the designated national security advisor. So they're already in a position where they are beginning this idea of engagement with the Trump administration about trying to secure peace.
Right. You know these people very well. You have been in U.S. diplomacy for years. You know these people personally. Do you think they and Zelensky and Yermak and his team speak the same language? Can they agree on a solid foundation to then negotiate with Putin?
Yeah, I do, actually. I was very encouraged, I have to say, by Zelensky's meeting with Trump in New York in September. They gave two press availabilities, two stand-ups, one before the meeting, one after the meeting. And in the one after the meeting, Trump came out and said, we had a great discussion. We agree on having peace. It has to be a fair peace. And he has a great relationship with Putin. He's going to call Putin and tell him to stop the war. I thought that was a very encouraging press conference from Trump, because it seemed to me that he understood that this can't be a failure. This can't be what appears to be a loss for Trump or weakness on Trump's part. I think he looks at the failure in Afghanistan during the Biden administration, the absolute catastrophic withdrawal. And I think he realizes that he does not want that to be his legacy.
Well, except that U.S. troops are not involved in Ukraine, so it's a different story.
That's right, but U.S. prestige is involved in Ukraine. And the way it appears in the world, the thing about Afghanistan is not that he wanted to stay in Afghanistan. Trump did not want to stay in Afghanistan, but it made the U.S. appear weak. Right. And lacking resolve. And
okay,
that's what he
let me ask you another question. Does Trump and people around him, do they listen to Central Europeans and their concerns? Poland, which is a staunch ally of Ukraine, is backing its push to join NATO. Does it make a difference, or is it really between Trump, Putin, and Zelensky?
Yeah. So first off, Trump makes his own decisions. I don't think that he's getting, influenced from his team. Rather, he's trying to use his team to implement his decisions. So Trump very much makes his own mind up. Secondly, I think they have a very favorable view of Poland. They had a very good relationship between the Trump administration and Poland during his first term. I think that has carried over to a positive attitude toward Poland now. Now, I don't think they're going to listen to Poland and say, Poland says bring Ukraine into NATO, so we'll do it. But I think when it comes to respect for Poland, having U.S. military presence in Poland, Poland pulling its share of the defense burden in Europe, leading on defense spending and support for NATO, I think all those things make a difference. And I want to come back to something you said about Mark Rutte. I think Mark did meet with President Trump. He is speaking, I think, with some knowledge of Trump's position when he says that we have to keep supporting Ukraine and that NATO needs to do this. And I think what Rutte is saying is Europe needs to do more. Europe should be stepping up. It's not a matter of just the United States continuing to support Ukraine, but Europe needs to step up to do more. And if he can deliver that, I think that's going to be seen very favorably by Trump.
Okay. Let's go back to the question of how this possible deal might look like. And correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but it seems Kyiv is basically resigned to trading some territory for peace and security. And of course, NATO membership comes into the picture. Is this something that Trump is likely to accept? NATO membership as a security guarantee?
Yeah. First off, I don't agree that we could call it trading land to Russia for peace, because no one is suggesting that
Oh,
Ukraine
excuse me. A lot of
cedes
people
territory.
on the Trump camp have been suggesting that openly, publicly.
Yeah, but no, I don't believe that. That is not the case. Ukraine is going to maintain its position that Russia is occupying Ukrainian territory and needs to leave. They're not going to recognize that this territory now belongs to Russia.
But that's
However,
another matter. That's a sort of legal wrangle,
yes,
perhaps long term. But in the short term, are they ready to accept that they will have to accept a ceasefire on the front line
yes,
where it is now?
yes, no, on that, yes. The idea that you do not take the territory back militarily, that you pursue recovering the territory by other means, diplomatic, etc., then yes, I think the Ukrainians are ready for that. There was an interview that President Zelensky gave to Sky News last week in which he was very clear about this and said that we can imagine a situation where we stop the hot phase of the war and we pursue getting our territory back by diplomatic and political means, but we have a ceasefire. But we need to have, this is Ukraine speaking, we need to have clear, reliable security guarantees, and that means NATO membership. And that is very much where the Ukrainian position is now. And
Mr.
again, I want to
Ambassador,
stress that this
thank
is
you very much.
aligning the Ukrainian position with where he believes the Trump position can be. He's met with Trump in
I
New
understand.
York. He's spoken with him on the phone. I think they are trying to align.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your insight.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.